corporate America is watching, and to be blunt, they are absolutely blindsided. A Filipino teenager has just completely dismantled every betting line and market forecast, sending the biggest power players in tennis scrambling to rewrite their quarterly strategies. Alex Eala was never part of the script. She wasn't designed to command this level of global scrutiny, but in an ecosystem heavily curated by Western storytelling and multi-million-dollar contracts, a single performance has fundamentally altered the landscape. The relevant question is no longer whether the world is paying attention. The real question is whether the industry is remotely prepared for the tidal wave that comes next. Let's be clear, Eala was effectively non-existent in the high-level discourse. Her name certainly wasn't circulating through the glass-walled boardrooms of Manhattan. She was absent from the strategic roadmap meetings at Nike's Beaverton headquarters. You wouldn't find her featured in the glossy editorials of tennis magazines that desperately try to anoint the next marketable superstar. At best, she was a murmur in the underground circuits, a raw talent recognized only by the diehards tracking junior rankings. But she remained virtually invisible to the massive corporate machine that dictates who gets the prime-time spotlight. Born in Manila, she emerged from a nation where basketball is religion and tennis courts are a luxury commodity. Eala's path to the Pro Tour was never going to be a straight line. The Philippines had zero history of producing a Grand Slam singles champion. The necessary infrastructure was non-existent, and the financial backing simply wasn't there. She didn't have access to the gilded pathway that American and Western European prospects view as a birthright. There were no elite academies waiting, no six-figure corporate endorsements at age 12, and no media machine building a mythology around her potential. That world didn't exist for her. But Eala possessed something far more dangerous. She secured a spot at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, grinding alongside Europe's elite, backed by a family that maintained unwavering belief when the rest of the world looked away. And she held the trophy from the 2022 US Open Junior Championships, a massive achievement that should have served as a blaring siren to every scout and agent in the business. It wasn't merely the victory, it was the texture of her game. The icy composure, the absolute lack of fear, and the rare ability to execute under suffocating pressure when the match was on the line. Yet the tennis establishment just shrugged and moved on. The big sponsors continued chasing the usual archetypes. They wanted the tall, power-serving Americans with prepackaged Instagram followings, or the Eastern European prodigies carrying familiar tennis royalty surnames. The marketing playbook has remained stagnant for decades. Locate a young Western player, ideally American, ideally blonde, and manufacture a global brand around her before she even lifts a major trophy. It is a predictable formula. It is safe, and historically it is profitable. But Alex Eala did not fit into that neat little box. She stood petite in stature, hailing from Southeast Asia, a region that high-level tennis executives have treated as an afterthought for generations. The collective assumption was that she would be a journeyman pro, perhaps cracking the top 50, maybe snagging a minor title, respectable, sure, but not a needle mover, and certainly not a marketing icon. That assumption is currently costing them millions in lost opportunity. Because while American sponsors were busy gazing at their own navels, a massive storm was gathering in the Pacific. Eala's matches were pulling viewership figures out of the Philippines that rivaled primetime television slots in major Western markets. Her digital engagement metrics were going vertical, and not just in Manila. The surge was sweeping across Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. An entire economic bloc was waking up to the reality that one of their own was ready to clash with the Titans. And then the match happened, the catalyst that changed the narrative forever. But before we break down the gameplay, you have to grasp the magnitude of the stakes. This wasn't just a sports story about one athlete. This was about a billion-dollar industry suddenly realizing it had been neglecting half the planet's population. It all came to a head during a seemingly routine second-round match at a WTA 500 event. Strictly looking at the statistics, this contest should have been irrelevant. Eala was ranked outside the top 100, staring down the barrel against a former top 20 veteran expected to sweep her in straight sets. Organizers had even relegated the match to a distant outer court. There was no primetime billing, no major network broadcast in the States. But then the unexpected occurred. Eala snatched the first set in a gritty tiebreak. Then she immediately applied pressure, breaking her opponent's serve early in the second set. As the match ground on, as she saved breakpoints and fired off winners that left her seasoned opponent flat-footed, a different phenomenon was unfolding thousands of miles away. In Manila, sports bars were standing room only. Impromptu viewing parties spilled into the streets and social media platforms began to melt down. The official WTA livestream, which usually hosts a sleepy crowd of a few thousand for early rounds, suddenly saw the counter skyrocket to over 200,000 concurrent viewers. The chat stream became a chaotic blur of Tagalog English and endless rows of Filipino flag emojis. Eala didn't falter. She closed the door and took the match in straight sets. The broadcast cameras captured her reaction. It wasn't theatrical, just a clenched fist and a gaze of steely, quiet determination. But in that split second, she transcended the role of a tennis player and became a cultural icon. Within the hour, the highlight reels were the #1 trending topic on X. TikTok was flooded with edits of her backhand winners, racking up millions of views instantly. Filipino celebrities who wouldn't know a drop shot from a dunk were suddenly posting tributes to Eala. Even the office of the president issued an official congratulatory statement. This wasn't sports news, this was a national event. And back in the United States, inside the sleek offices of global sports marketing agencies, the mood shifted from indifference to confusion. The question on everyone's lips was simple. Who is this girl? Why are the streaming numbers from Southeast Asia dwarfing the figures we get for our top 10 seeds? How did we miss this? The panic started as a whisper, a few urgent emails, some frantic calls to regional scouts, but behind the scenes, a seismic shift was already underway. Marketing executives began frantically pulling data sheets. Social media teams were dissecting engagement rates that defied their standard models. Brand managers were finally staring at demographic reports they had tossed in the trash for years, and the numbers staring back were absolutely staggering. They realized that the Philippines alone offers a market of over 100 million passionate souls. Southeast Asia represents a sleeping giant with a population exceeding 600 million people. And while tennis viewership across the region has been on a steady upward trajectory, the industry completely failed to cultivate a homegrown star capable of unlocking that massive potential until this very moment. According to confidential sources, one major sponsor rumored to be a titan in the global athletic apparel industry immediately convened an emergency strategy session where the agenda was singular and the atmosphere was reportedly frantic. The executives were demanding to know how they let a prospect like this slip through their fingers because Eala wasn't merely turning heads. She was generating the specific type of magnetic appeal that converts directly into merchandise sales, fierce brand loyalty, and aggressive market expansion. This is precisely the caliber of influence that Nike harnessed to construct a global empire around Serena Williams, transforming her from an athlete into a cultural icon. It is the same lightning-in-a-bottle energy that propelled Naomi Osaka into the stratosphere, establishing her as one of the highest-paid female athletes on the entire planet. Yet these corporations had largely overlooked her potential, and now that the match on the court had concluded, the true battle for her signature was only just commencing in the boardrooms. This is the point where the narrative becomes complicated, because whenever vast sums of money change hands this quickly, skepticism arises, and Alex Eala was about to find herself thrust into the center of a heated debate she never solicited. It took less than 72 hours for the rumors to begin circulating through the grapevine, signaling a massive shift in the industry landscape. Deeply connected industry insiders have reported that a minimum of 3 major global conglomerates have already made contact with Eala's management team, not with formal contracts just yet, but with preliminary inquiries designed to test the waters and gauge interest. Nike, a company that famously declined to sign Eala just 2 years prior, is now reportedly scrambling to reverse that decision and bring her into the fold before it is too late. Meanwhile, Wilson, her current equipment sponsor, has suddenly expressed an urgent desire to significantly expand and upgrade their existing partnership to lock her down. Beyond the sports world, heavy hitters like Gatorade, Rolex, and even high-end luxury fashion houses, brands that typically ignore tennis players outside the top 5 rankings, are now circling like sharks. However, do not mistake this for a standard orderly recruitment process. This has rapidly devolved into a chaotic scramble for position. Leaked internal communications from one major brand, while never officially verified, have been widely cited by reporters revealing the frantic tone of the conversations taking place behind closed doors. Marketing departments are reportedly facing intense scrutiny, being forced to justify why their scouting metrics failed to identify Alice as a top-tier asset much sooner. Data analysis firms have been tasked with frantically projecting her potential market value across Southeast Asia, while legal teams are drafting flexible contract structures that can be executed at a moment's notice. One specific email allegedly penned by a senior marketing director perfectly encapsulated the panic spreading through the corporate offices. The message bluntly stated that they cannot afford to be behind the curve on this again, a clear and painful reference to the situation with Naomi Osaka. When Osaka captured the 2018 US Open title, she was not considered a high-priority sponsorship target. Although she had existing agreements, they were nowhere near the value she actually commanded, and it took major brands months to fully comprehend the asset they had sitting right in front of them. They had missed the significance of a biracial bilingual phenomenon who possessed the unique ability to dominate both the American and Japanese commercial markets simultaneously. By the time these companies finally mobilized her, asking price had gone through the roof, and the industry learned a brutal lesson that they are terrified of repeating with Eala in 2026. However, there is a significant complication. Alice's management team has shown zero interest in engaging in a bidding war, at least not at this current stage. They have made it clear that they are looking for something far more substantial and meaningful than a quick cash infusion or a standard endorsement deal. They are seeking a partnership that genuinely respects her personal identity, honors her unique narrative, and values her deep connection to the Philippines rather than treating her as a diversity metric to be checked off. They intend for her to become the face of something authentic, and that specific requirement is exactly where the friction began to emerge. Despite all the excitement and the sudden influx of corporate interest, a wave of cynicism began to creep into the online discourse, with fans raising some very uncomfortable questions on social media platforms. People began asking why these brands are suddenly so interested now, and where this support was when she was grinding out victories in junior tournaments without any spotlight. They questioned why the corporate checkbooks were closed when she was struggling through grueling qualifying rounds with minimal support, leading to the phrase diversity play trending in the comment sections. Critics were quick to accuse these sponsors of blatant opportunism, suggesting they were merely jumping on a popular trend without any genuine desire to invest in her development. Some astute observers pointed out that Alice's sudden visibility only arrived after she proved she could generate revenue, implying her worth was being calculated solely by viewership analytics rather than her raw talent or potential. On the other hand, there were those who defended the brands, arguing that this is simply the brutal reality of how the sports business operates. These defenders argued that sponsors only invest where there is a guaranteed return, and that Alice's success created the opportunity, labeling it as capitalism rather than exploitation. As the debate raged on across the internet, Alex Eala chose to remain completely silent, but her management team decided it was time to speak up. What they released next made it abundantly clear that this negotiation was not just about logos on a shirt. It was about power dynamics and who ultimately controls the narrative. Eala's manager issued a public statement that was carefully drafted and professional, yet the underlying message was sharp and unmistakable. The statement emphasized that Alex has always remained laser-focused on her athletic performance and her game, rather than chasing publicity or fame. It went on to say that while they are grateful for the surge of support, they are extremely mindful of selecting partnerships that align strictly with her core values and her community, rejecting any attempt to simply capitalize on a fleeting moment. They declared that their goal is to build something sustainable for the long term, a statement that served as a direct warning shot to any brands looking for a quick payout. It served as a stark reminder that Eala's team is fully aware of the corporate game being played and that they understand the leverage they currently hold. They knew that the sponsors were not just interested in the athlete, but in the massive market she represented, and they had absolutely no intention of allowing her to be used as a pawn. However, the public backlash continued to simmer. If anything, the controversy intensified, creating a divide where one side consisted of fans who felt fiercely protective of Eala, viewing her as a symbol for underrepresented athletes finally receiving their due credit. These supporters were adamant that they did not want to see her inspiring story commodified and sold off to the highest bidder. They refused to accept her being reduced to nothing more than a calculated marketing strategy. While on the opposing side, industry veterans argued that such a reaction was hopelessly naive. The counter-argument from the professionals was simple: sports has always been a business, and that reality is never going to change. They posited that if Eala's meteoric rise prize opened doors for other Southeast Asian players and forces global sponsors to invest in markets they have historically ignored, isn't that ultimately a positive outcome and a sign of real progress? The controversy has exploded across the media landscape, dominating editorial columns, sports podcasts, and analytical deep dives, with many pundits applauding Alex for keeping her feet firmly planted on the ground. On the flip side, a vocal contingent has blasted her management team for playing it too safe, arguing that their hesitation is effectively letting massive commercial opportunities and cold hard cash slip right through their fingers. Then there is the cynical camp accusing the entire discourse of being nothing more than performative activism, complaining that while everyone loves to preach about fairness and representation, nobody is actually lifting a finger to dismantle the systemic barriers that caused this mess. The narrative took a sharp, dramatic turn when a legendary former top 10 player decided to grab the microphone and weigh in on the saga. During a candid sit-down interview, the tennis icon didn't mince words, stating, "Look, it is fantastic that Alex is finally getting her moment in the sun, but let's be real for a second." She continued with a brutal truth, asserting that if Alex fit the traditional mold, or hailed from a Western powerhouse nation, these multi-million-dollar contracts would have been signed and sealed years ago. The legend concluded that the sudden corporate interest says absolutely everything you need to know about the current state of professional tennis, a soundbite that immediately went viral across social platforms. While the statement was framed as a show of solidarity, it also ripped the bandage off the most uncomfortable and ignored aspect of this entire debate. Tennis has battled a diversity and inclusion problem for decades, and simply throwing a mountain of cash at one breakthrough athlete does absolutely nothing to fix the structural rot. While the public storm rages, Alex herself has maintained radio silence, though insiders report that behind the scenes the rising star is completely drained by the relentless noise and pressure. She never asked to be a political symbol or a business case study. She just wants to get out on the court and play. But her skyrocketing success has exposed a massive fault line in the industry that the world refuses to ignore. Now the entire ecosystem, from corporate sponsors and die-hard fans to the media and fellow competitors, is being forced to take a definitive stance. However, there is a massive underlying story that the mainstream conversation is missing. The true revolution is not just happening in high-rise boardrooms. The real shift is occurring at the grassroots level, and the scale of this movement is far larger and more transformative than any analyst initially predicted. We are seeing reports from tennis academies across the Philippines showing enrollment numbers hitting all-time highs as interest explodes. Children who had never even held a racket before are flooding registration lines for lessons, while schools are pausing classes to stream Alex's matches, and her image is dominating billboards across major cities. Crucially, this wave of enthusiasm is not contained within the Philippines. It is spilling over borders and igniting the entire region. From Indonesia and Malaysia to Thailand, tennis is suddenly enjoying a visibility across Southeast Asia that was previously unimaginable, forcing sponsors to finally look at the engagement data they ignored for years. The Asia-Pacific sector is rapidly evolving into one of the most explosive and lucrative sports markets on the entire planet. Historically, badminton and table tennis have reigned supreme in these territories, but tennis has been quietly and steadily chipping away at that dominance. The core issue was that major Western brands never bothered to invest in or cultivate local stars who could genuinely resonate with that massive audience. These companies lazily assumed Asian fans would just support whoever was lifting the trophy, completely underestimating the power of representation, until Alex proved them spectacularly wrong. Comparisons to the Naomi Osaka phenomenon were inevitable given how Osaka's rise caused a seismic shift in the Japanese tennis landscape. Osaka did far more than just inspire young players. She fundamentally rewrote the playbook on how the sport is marketed and consumed throughout Japan. Sponsors are learning the hard way that seeing an athlete who looks like you, speaks your language, and shares your culture creates a bond that no amount of generic advertising can ever replicate. Now, Alex is sparking that exact same cultural electricity, but on a much wider scale across the entirety of Southeast Asia. The stakes here are arguably even higher, because unlike Japan, which already possessed a mature tennis infrastructure, Southeast Asia was largely considered an untapped frontier. We are not talking about the potential of just a single nation, but the economic power of a massive collective region. American sponsors are finally waking up to the reality of the situation. Giants like Nike have ruled the Asian market for decades, but almost exclusively through basketball and soccer. Tennis was always treated as an afterthought, but internal projections for 2026 suggest that signing Alex could unlock unprecedented retail expansion and brand loyalty. The numbers speak for themselves. Sales of her signature racket have tripled in the Philippines, and her apparel line is completely sold out, despite her not having a major WTA title yet. As one prominent sports marketing analyst bluntly stated, "If she manages to win a Grand Slam, she transcends being just a tennis star. She becomes a verified cultural phenomenon." And the brand that secures her signature now will effectively own that entire market for the next generation. While the financial implications are staggering, the cultural stakes are equally massive as Southeast Asian players are shifting from hoping for representation to outright demanding it. Junior players from across the region are finding their voices questioning why they lack the developmental pathways afforded to their European counterparts. National federations are now applying heavy pressure on the WTA to schedule more tournaments in Asia, demanding a fairer share of the global calendar. Simultaneously, fans are calling out international broadcasters for bypassing matches that feature Asian talent in favor of established Western names. Alex may not have intended to start this revolution, but she has undeniably become the face and symbol of this movement. Whether she embraces that heavy mantle or not, the role belongs to her now, leading everyone to ask what happens next. The answer to that question could permanently alter the trajectory of the sport, and the speculation surrounding her next move is absolutely relentless. Will Eala put pen to paper on a record-breaking mega deal, or will she hold out for a partnership that aligns strictly with her personal terms? Will she step up to become the face of a worldwide marketing campaign, or will she choose a quieter path to focus solely on her game? While her team remains tight-lipped, sources close to the negotiations confirm that multiple global brands are locked in a bidding war. The offers on the table are reportedly significant, offering not just life-changing money, but a level of creative control that is virtually unheard of. Rumor has it that some sponsors are willing to let Alex shape the campaigns herself to ensure they honor her values, a level of leverage that athletes at her stage almost never possess. Alex is far from being just another athlete on the tour. She has evolved into a symbol representing something much larger than her own career, and major global brands are fully aware of her marketability. We are also hearing credible reports from insiders that she is planning to launch her own charitable foundation specifically dedicated to scouting and developing tennis talent throughout Southeast Asia. Should those plans come to fruition, we are looking at a development that could completely upend the traditional power dynamics of the sport. Rather than waiting around for corporate sponsors to finally invest in the region, she would be actively building the necessary infrastructure herself, creating tangible pathways for the next generation and ensuring that the children idolizing her today won't have to fight the same uphill battles she endured. However, we cannot ignore the inherent risks involved in such a bold undertaking. The pressure resting on her shoulders is absolutely immense. Every single match she plays is now under the microscope, and every defeat is dissected by analysts, with the heavy expectation that she must keep winning and rising to validate the media frenzy. But we have to ask the hard questions. If she stumbles, if she endures a difficult season, if injuries hamper her speed, or if the public interest simply evaporates, what happens then? Unfortunately, that is the brutal and often unforgiving reality of professional sports. Raw potential has never been a guarantee of lifting trophies, and the very same industry that is celebrating her achievements right now could just as easily pivot its focus to the next breakout star. Yet perhaps winning titles isn't the only metric that matters here. The real headline might be that Alex's meteoric rise has already fundamentally altered the conversation around global tennis. She has effectively compelled major sponsors to completely rethink their marketing playbooks, while simultaneously inspiring thousands of young kids who previously believed that the world of professional tennis was out of their reach. That kind of cultural impact is permanent. It is a legacy that no terminated contract or lost endorsement deal can ever take away from her. Because whether she goes on to become the next Grand Slam champion or not, and regardless of whether she signs the most lucrative deal in tennis history, Alex has already achieved something truly extraordinary. She has brought visibility to the invisible and made the impossible feel attainable. In a sporting landscape that has neglected entire regions for decades, her impact is nothing short of revolutionary. This brings us to the ultimate question facing the tennis world right now. Are we witnessing merely the opening chapter of Alex's story? Or is this the catalyst for a massive paradigm shift that will reshape the sport for the entire upcoming generation? When she started, Alex didn't set out with a grand plan to disrupt the industry. Her only goal was simply to step onto the court and play tennis. Yet her journey to the top has shined a harsh spotlight on the systemic gaps, the inherent biases, and the missed commercial opportunities that have defined this sport for far too long. American sponsors are scrambling to react not out of benevolence, but out of sheer business necessity, because they realize the world is watching, and the global market is far more expansive than they previously calculated. The next steps lie squarely in Alex's hands, but one thing is indisputable. The tennis establishment will never view Southeast Asia through the same lens again. If this analysis sparked a new perspective for you or made you feel the magnitude of this moment, make sure to hit that subscribe button immediately because the most pivotal developments in tennis often happen off the court, and we are here to bring you those stories. We want to hear your take in the comments section below. Do you believe these sponsors are genuinely supporting Alex's vision, or is this strictly a financial decision? Let's get the debate started.